Hello everybody, this is Mithril Zenith, and today we are talking archers. In my most recent, not most recent, in a video a few weeks ago, my first ever Unit Design 101 archers, which took off, and thank you so much for everyone who's joined the channel after Unit Design 101. Those videos are doing far better than I anticipated, could have ever predicted. I talked about archers, I talked about how some of them have what I called a planned obsolescence. I talked about some various things about archers, and I figured I want to talk a little bit more about archers, and what's the best way to do that aside from just doing a tier list and talking about them. So this is going to be an archer tier list of a sort. So I am going to tier all units that start in an archer or effectively archer class. Foot archers only, no mounted archers. And I'm also not counting certain units like the Three Houses students who can really become anything, or units like Mozu who are villagers, and even though they are most useful in archer, don't really start as archer. I'm not really counting them. I'm also not counting snipers or archers that come like so late they're basically snipers, if I forgot them. And though it kills me, the only reason why I wanted to include Bow Knights ultimately was so I could have so many FE1 portraits that were all the same, because they just reused Gordon's portrait for everyone and just made very slight tweaks to like the hairline or like the color or the armor, or sometimes not even that. I am also recording on a new microphone. This is my first recording with this microphone, so hopefully it works out. Hopefully you have less of my lip smacks and breathiness in this microphone. I'm still going to be testing and adjusting audio. I'm doing this recording, one, because I'm still in the middle of scripting my next Unit Design 101, and two, because I want to test the microphone. I want to get the bugs out now, and I want to figure this out, how I can do this better. So, without further ado, let's talk archers. As you'll notice, these tiers are a little bit different than what you might be used to seeing. Solid all game, good payoff, occasional usefulness, planned obsolescence, mid, or not even good early on. So, archers have problems. I discussed their problems in Unit Design 101. I have a lot of people making suggestions for how to fix them. I might consider talking about them later. But right now I wanted to talk about... Okay, I listed several archers in that video, but let's go through every archer in the series and see where they fit. Are they good? Are they bad? And talk about how their games impact their usefulness. Without further ado, let's start at the beginning. Is Gordon planned obsolescence, or is he just mid? I think Gordon's actually just mid. I personally love Castor, but I'm gonna have to call him mid as well. Tomas... So everyone who's actually does FE1 wants me to put Tomas into good payoff. I'm gonna say he has occasional usefulness. So, weird thing about FE1 is that if you get Tomas, you get him the 2 levels he needs, get him to promotion, and then give him the, yeah, I'm just gonna still call him mid. You do all this work, you give him your promotion, and you give him the only weapon book in the entire game, weapon manual, and then he can use Parthia, and he's a promoted sniper, and his stats are slightly better than George's. If you level up Gordon and promote Gordon, his stats will be about the same, maybe slightly lower, than George's. George is basically what you get when you just get a base promoted sniper that you've leveled for a couple levels as archer. And yes, Tomas is slightly better. I personally don't put too much stock into how much that helps him over. It's hard for me to put him into like planned obsolescence, because by the time you have Tomas, that's not really worth discussing. FE1 NES is also a game that doesn't really have a lot of use for archers. It has some use. Javelins are a little harder to come by. Like, you can buy them at the start of the game, but if you don't buy them, I think there's like a part of the game like halfway through that you just stop being able to buy javelins. And yeah, you can get like lightning swords, which cover your 1-2 range needs pretty well, but hand axes you stop being able to buy any axes. You stop being able to buy halfway through. And so archers are pretty good. They also get pretty good stats later on, and enemy snipers have crit on everyone and is terrifying. But honestly, the game is not hard enough to really necessitate their use, and especially if you're abusing glitches, then it doesn't even matter. But even if you're not, it's like, okay, anyone can hold Parthia if you give them a weapon manual. Finding an archer that can do it if you can't give them a weapon manual is difficult, but theoretically possible. If you use George a lot, he can sometimes get there. If you get really lucky with Wolf, he can sometimes get there. But yeah, Parthia is really hard to use without using the weapon manual. Archers are just kind of mid. There's no real reason to use them. Gaiden archers. Good payoff should really just be called the Gaiden archer tier, but there may or may not be archers that fall into this tier. Basically, Gaiden archers kind of suck early on. They have really good range, obviously, but their accuracy is terrible as archers. As snipers, they start getting pretty good with their improved base stats from sniper bases, but it's really not until you hit Bow Knight that they start getting good. But it goes from archer is really terrible and really hard to feed kills to because they're so inaccurate, but they can attack at 5 range with an equipped bow, to sniper, which is better, faster, more accurate, stronger, but still not as perfect as you'd like them to be, to Bow Knight. Oh my goodness, you can just kind of do whatever you want. Yeah, that's all I need to say. Gaiden is a great game for payoff, for building up units, and the payoff of getting them to tier 3, and archers are not only no exception, they're probably the best example of the rule, although the Falconite promotion in Gaiden specifically is insane. FE3, you might think that, hey, archers are more useful here, right? In Book 1, no. So if it's Book 1 Gordon, he's like mid. I'm not going to put him in not even good early on, because when you have this limited number of units, it's kind of all hands on deck. But yeah, Book 2, Gordon, I guess that's going to be where I put, like, Tomas. Actually, Tomas in Mystery of the Emblem is even worse than he is in FE1, I think. I actually don't remember enough, so I'm just going to put him in mid. Book 2, and yes, I know these are hunters, not archers, Castor and Warren, but I'm putting them in here, so shut up. It's my tier list. Planned Obsolescence. Book 2, they're very, very, very important for dealing with the early wyverns. And then after you deal with the early wyverns, you can kind of forget about them. You can kind of just like, okay, archer time is done. Now it's time for all the calves and flyers to make their showings, and then you get to indoor maps where it's like, well, I guess I'm still using my calves and flyers. They're just dismounted and sad now. Not too much else to say. Archers have some maps where they have niches. The desert against the flying wyverns is a pretty good example. But even then, by that point, you have snipers that come in and do their job, but they already have the bases and don't need to go through the training arc. So that's what I mean by planned obsolescence, by the way, is not that they aren't useful or not that they can't be good later on, can't be made good, but that usually their job stops being as useful for them specifically to do. And I'll get to more examples later on, but it's like, okay, they play an important role early on, and they can continue to be decent units later on throughout the game, but their primary role is to deploy them early on for a specific job, and then they kind of fall off, and any later usefulness that they could have is fulfilled by other units, usually pre-promoted snipers in an archer's case. But we'll talk more about that when we get to FE6. I can't put Jamka anywhere other than solid all game. Even if you take his killer bow away from him and just give him a steel bow, he still clears the arena, he still kills everything he gets to. The only problem is getting him places. But I mean, what, do you want to put it into occasional usefulness for that? Jamka is kind of the best an archer can get. And I'm even gonna say, yeah, I'll probably put, I don't know. It's hard to say. I put him in occasional usefulness solid all game. I wanted to include Bow Knights as well, not just for the meme of having Gordon's face 5 times, but also for discussing Lester, because yes, he is on a horse, but new wave FE4 logic from people who've actually played the game, being on a horse only gets you so far. You still have to actually be able to fight, deal damage, and survive once you're in the fight. And Midir can't reliably do that unless he gets some lucky level ups early on. Jamka doesn't care. Jamka just fights and kills and wins. And so while I want to put him in solid all game, the fact that he does have these restrictions on him makes me want to bite myself and put him into occasional usefulness. I can't say good payoff because it's not like it's slow and then he speeds up or builds up and has a really outstanding late game. It's just kind of, he's here when you need him to be. And I will debate what those tiers should be later on. Ubello, not Ubello, Fabale, I guess in some translations Ubello. Ubello/Fabale, and Asalio. Asalio is mid. Ubello has occasional usefulness, purely because of the UFEL access, is that such massive damage on one weapon cannot be understated. He does have some, I think it's either accuracy or speed issues when using it. I know he has speed issues compared to like the killer bow because the UFEL's heavy. Was it speed issues? Maybe it gives him speed. I forget. Accuracy compared to the killer bow can be a little bit shaky, but the raw damage output allows him to do unspeakable things to certain bosses like Ishtar and any flyer that exists. It's insane. However, outside of that, you're gonna find a hard time actually using him because he starts at a pretty low level, and yes, while he can kill things, he kills one enemy, and FE4 is very unkind to archers, which is also the other reason why I can't justify putting Jamka in solid all game, because massive squads of units that primarily have one range weapons are not great for archers in games where you have to protect them, because these massive squads of mounted units can all attack you, and archers aren't great at taking potentially 8+ attacks in one phase. Doesn't matter who you are, unless you have massive defense, which Fabale does not. And Asalio is basically, he's better than the worst Fabale you can make, but he's worse than most of the good Fabales you can make. And the fact that he does not have UFEL and can never have UFEL does mean I'm gonna say he's not even good. I'm gonna do that. Tanya and Ronin, I'm just gonna say they're mid. I'm not gonna go as far as to say they're not even good early on. I think they have their usefulness because of their accuracy, the accuracy of bows, and it's all hands on deck in Thracia, especially in the early game. They have their usefulness. I don't think it's the same as a planned obsolescence where they're really useful and then they fall off hard. And I don't think it's like an occasional usefulness of like, okay, yeah, they pop in, they're good, they're solid, they do their job, but they're not like they're not rock stars. I just think they're kind of mid. There's not really a huge place in Thracia for archers specifically. Archers can't capture. there's not a lot of early flyers in Thracia, and because of the capture system being what it is, it's not like there is a limited supply of 1 to 2 range weapons. You just need to find enemies that have them. Yes, they're a little less accurate, but you're going to be wanting to train these more bulky units anyway. And because there's not a split promotion item system, it's all Master Seals, odds are you're probably not wanting to spend an early Master Seal on an early Archer in order to get them to an early Sniper and really rock out with usefulness. Like Ronin, once he hits Sniper, even, Tanya, once she hits Sniper, they can be pretty solid, but what are you giving up to make them a Sniper is the question. They're a fun meme, they're pretty solid units if you invest into them, but ultimately they're Archers, they're mid, they don't really have any overwhelming purpose in their games that make them stand out specifically as Archers. What are you even doing here? I thought I removed all the horse Archers. Wolt. I'm debating whether to put Wolt. Okay, Dorothy. I think I have to put them into planned obsolescence because they do serve a purpose. Even if they are not great at their purpose, like they can't one-round wyverns. I'm sorry, it's never gonna happen. Unless you get like the luckiest Wolt in existence, he's never gonna double in one round a wyvern. They still deal massive damage to the wyverns and can enable one of your other units to kill them on like a second or third attack. Like the wyvern comes in, attacks you, you counter. One of your archers deals 20 plus damage to the wyvern, and then your other unit finishes them off. Feeding wyverns to other units, just giving all that experience to that other unit. Yeah, planned obsolescence, they're great at doing that job, chipping down. And if you promote them, they will basically, it's the Gordon George problem for both of them. If you level up, and this is like leveling to like 15 plus and promote, not just leveling to 10 and promote, but leveling like 15 and promoting, Wolt will basically be the equivalent of Klein, maybe a couple points here or there, and Dorothy will basically be the equivalent of a Gren. Again, a couple points here or there. In my current draft run, I drafted both Sue and Dorothy. And Dorothy, I got to around level, was either 16 or 18 before promoting. And I promoted her around the time I got a Gren. And their stats were basically about the same. Dorothy had like a little bit more speed and skill, and that was it. So, yeah, planned obsolescence. They do a really important job in the early game. And then they kind of just, doesn't matter if you just drop them. I'm gonna say Will and Rebecca are not even good early on. I could be nice and call them mid, but that's just because their game is easy enough. The problem with FE7 is not that the enemies are strong, it's that deployment slots are very limited. And so you need to be very, very picky about who you bring into a map. And so unless these are your units that you are using to funnel experience into for a chapter in order to boost your experience rank for that chapter, these units are not good. Double effectiveness kills Rebecca's potential early game usefulness. First of all, the Pegasi aren't that strong. Hector one-shots them, Oswin can one-shot them, I think he might need like a stronger lance, Marcus one-shots them, but Rebecca doesn't, and the funny thing is, she does not one-shot the Pegasus Knights on Hector hard mode by exactly 6 damage, which is exactly how much damage she would have if FE7 had triple effectiveness instead of double effectiveness. So I wonder if you could argue to put her into planned obsolescence for, I believe I heard that the Japanese version of FE7 had triple effective archer damage, in which case Rebecca would have that effect of being able to one-shot Pegasus Knights in Chapter 12 and thus be able to carry on a higher level of usefulness. Because getting the kills, she gets the experience instead of giving it to someone else. She gets the experience easier, she levels up easier, she snowballs from there. Snowballs is a relative term for archers, but you get my point. Will, I think he just joins too late, and in Lin mode, there's not really a lot for him to do. I think there are some elements where you can bring them into ballistas and whatnot, and have them be useful there, but I don't fully remember, don't quote me on that. I know the ballistas exist, but I don't think that they're in all that useful of places for Will or Rebecca to use in FE7 specifically. I think they're mostly entrenched on the enemy side. You're not really given a free ballista like you are in FE8. Speaking of FE8, Nami's mid. I want Nami to be better, but she's mid. Not a horrible unit. Perfectly trainable. Like I said in Unit Design 101, her support with Colm actually does a huge amount for her, because that extra hit means she's hitting 90 to 100% pretty easily. The extra damage is enough to push her into that from just doing chip to actually doing, like, getting close to maybe killing. If she manages to double a unit, she's potentially one-rounding them unless they have a lot of HP, like some of the soldiers and revenants. And yes, anyone can do that. But the fact that she can one-round fairly early on does mean she's easier to feed experience into. Is it efficient? No. Is it optimal? Heck no. Efficiency and optimality basically say for FE8 you don't use anyone outside of Vanessa and Seth. But I don't think that's an enjoyable experience, and I don't think that's the way that most people actually play. I think that's just the way that the hardcore Fire Emblem community tells people to play, and says and claims that they play in, because they've done the math, they've done the numbers, and this is how to mathematically solve the game. But I don't know how many people actually play that way. I don't know how many people actually play mathematically. But yeah, either way, she's pretty mid. There's no point to use her. There's no strong flyers to use her against. There's no situation in which you say, I really need an archer in FE8. There are a couple of flyers, like on Phantom Ship, that she can be useful against, but by that point, if you haven't trained her already, she's not gonna be useful. Rolf, can we just agree he's not even good early on? He's a meme. Always has been, always will be. I love him. I love Rolf. He's not as hard to train as, you know, the numbers might say, but he's not good. There's no reason to use an archer in FE9. Even on the Raven boat map, you can wall off the boat and you can have him attack the Ravens, but it takes him like 3 hits with effective damage with Rolf's bow, or even a forged iron, to kill a Raven. The Ravens are going to proc their healing AI and retreat and steal a vulnerate from their friend and use it before Rolf kills them by himself. It's funny, but it's not worth it. Leonardo I'm going to put up in occasional usefulness. Because Radiant Dawn, Dawn Brigade maps are all hands on deck, Leonardo gets plenty of chances to shine. The ledge mechanic actually provides him quite a bit of benefit in certain indoor maps. The Lugnasad is a great boost of power for him in the Laguz maps, allowing him to at the very least provide meaningful chip damage from a safe range. Which is meaningful because if anyone who can't survive 5 tigers, anyone who can't survive getting mauled by tigers can't take even 1 hit on that, can't be in range of anything. And so attacking with a bow is kind of a benefit because he can stay away from the pain and still contribute. And then all the maps with ledges that the Dawn Brigade have, he is great on, because ledge bonuses are pretty extreme. It's like 20 or 30 hit and 3 damage, I want to say. I don't remember exactly. Maybe it's like It's a couple points of damage and a significant chunk of hit and avoid that you get for being uphill. And Dawn Brigade maps, especially the Act 3, the two defend, like the Cliffside map and the 313, the map that literally everyone said I'm not allowed to like because you can just cheese out Ike if you give him a Slim Sword. Both of those maps are perfectly designed with you uphill on ledges, firing downhill, and he's great. He is great on those maps, and he's solid on other maps too. He's pretty decent overall. I can't necessarily say he's solid all game, Part 4, unless you invested ludicrous amounts of experience into him. He's not gonna really be that effective. But he has occasionally usefulness, which is more than I can say about a decent amount of that cast. Shadow Dragon Gordon. He's not a good payoff. He's not solid all game. But I am going to say he has Planned Obsolescence. And Planned Obsolescence in Shadow Dragon is arguably more meaningful than the Planned Obsolescence in Mystery of the Emblem. You're not more meaningful, but it's different. His Planned Obsolescence is the fact that he has a bow, and the first boss doesn't have a hand axe. And so he deals chip damage without having to buy and spend a lot of javelins, which are attacking at disadvantage, and it's the Shadow Dragon version of Weapon Triangle Disadvantage, which, especially if you're playing on Hard 5, is like 2 or 3 points of damage lost and like 20 hit. It's absurd. Basically, the way that the Weapon Triangle works is that you get... I don't know why I'm explaining this in a video about archers that don't interact with the Weapon Triangle, but with the Weapon Triangle and Shadow Dragon, you get, based on the weapon type, a certain type of bonus based on your weapon rank. The bonus increases as your weapon goes higher. And if you are ever attacking at Weapon Triangle Disadvantage, you lose all of the bonuses from your weapon rank. Which is why sometimes the enemy axe fighters will lose like 3 points of damage and 15 points of hit or something crazy when they're attacking a sword unit versus when they're attacking a lance unit. It's kind of crazy just how extreme that weapon triangle is. And so not having to fight uphill against the weapon triangle but still being able to use 2-range damage to chip is something. Granted, if you're trying any sort of efficient way to get through Chapter 1, you're probably not doing that, and you're probably just, like, re-rolling with the save state tile until you get a really good hit or a crit or something. But it's an option, it's a save option. He can get a bunch of safe levels that way, and then you can see how really mid he is. But Planned Obsolescence is what I'm going to say, because archers do have a point just because of their accuracy and ability to deal chip damage against enemies, not just bosses, but enemies in general that need multiple units to take them on, and being able to deal some damage and not take damage in return, primo. Tomas, not even good by Shadow Dragon. All the bonuses that he was getting, all the favors he was getting from the low caps and base stat promotions from FE1 and FE3 are gone. All the benefits he was getting are gone, and he no longer has his usefulness. I'm gonna put Gordon and Ryan, and I should have put Warren on here as well again, but he's here too. I don't want to dig through and find him. Never mind, I will. Into Planned Obsolescence, because once again, Planned Obsolescence is king. Planned Obsolescence is honestly where most of these archers end up in theory. Just because it kind of feels like where they belong. They do their job, they stick around, they shoot the enemies, they get... but they're probably at the top of Planned Obsolescence, to be honest. I'm not necessarily tiering these within tiers, but The new mystery of the Emblem archers are at the top because you have forged bows. Forged bows deal a lot. I'm not going to put them into occasional usefulness because by the time you are fighting flying wyverns, like the wyvern dragons, like in the desert, the ones that have like 12 move and 1/2 range on Lunatic, by then, 1, you have George, and 2, you have Worm Slayers and Dragon Spears that you can potentially forge. And so by that point, the necessity of using archers is reduced. Even if they are still potentially useful, their like necessity of that niche is reduced to an extent that I feel safe in putting them in planned obsolescence, because that also happens so much later after the fact of the wyverns that you're probably not really using them in the interim before Henri's Way. And then once you hit Henri's Way, again, like I said, you have snipers, you have other units capable of doing these things. You don't need your base archers to be promoted by that time. Plus, the fact that they merged all the promotion items into Master Seals does have a limiting factor on why you would use them over promoting a unit with better stats, better outlook, and if you need a sniper, just reclassing them over into sniper to use those bows, because sniper starts with C bows. Planned obsolescence, really good for when they start and then kind of fall off. Virion is kind of the Gordon style of planned obsolescence here, where there's not really dangerous flyers for him to fight, but there is... Okay, so here's the thing. On Lunatic, he is very hard to keep alive in Chapter 1. If you manage to do it, he will find some places to deal chip damage. In other difficulties on hard and whatnot, he still finds places to deal some chip damage early on, and then he kind of falls off just because he's not that great of a unit. Like, he can be a fine unit, but anyone can be a fine unit. It's Awakening. Nothing else really too special about him, super special about an archer, but he has a presence in the early game, and therefore, because of the way Awakening works, particularly on Lunatic, he's allowed to have planned obsolescence instead of just being mid. Because that 2-range chip is meaningful. Setsuna. Okay. Here's the thing. Birthright Setsuna is not unusable, but she's mid at best. Revelation Setsuna, hard pass. I don't know if she's one of the worst units in Fates. I don't know that for sure. I don't have hard proof or anything. I'm not a Fates guy. You shouldn't ask me about it. But what I do know is that she's definitely in contention. And that's not a great sign. You can make her work in Birthright. But you can make anyone work in Birthright. There's not really a point to using her over anyone else unless you just like her. Unless you just like using archers. I forget what her side class is, but we're talking about archers here. I don't really care. Meanwhile, Takumi is solid all game. No complaint. No one didn't see this coming. Fujinumi, really high stats, really easy ramp up into promotion, maintains usefulness all game long, with not a lot of effort put into him. Fantastic unit. Fantastic, just player phase nuke in Birthright in a game that doesn't necessarily need player phase nukes, but even in Revelations when he joins somewhat later, still useful. Just on account of his raw stats alone and the Fujinumi, which allows him to just Shred because it is a very powerful weapon with no drawbacks in a game that requires you to forge weapons an absurd amount of times in order to give them that power. Weapons that have no drawbacks, aka iron weapons, and arguably bronze weapons, even though they can't crit, they mean that you deal less crits. Again, it's Fates. I'm not the best at explaining Fates. I wish that I was, because there's a lot to do in Fates. Also, I realize I'm like waving my hand right in front of the microphone where I have it stated now, so I hope that whooshing didn't get picked up. But who's probably arguably a better unit even than Takumi is Niles. One, he's in a game that is harder, that necessitates his skills more. In Conquest, by the way, Revelations Niles is probably down into like occasional usefulness. Maybe lower, I don't know. I don't actually remember how important it is to capture units. But capture is his thing. He captures units no one else can in Conquest. And Conquest is the game where your skill at figuring out what units to capture and capturing the right ones can very, very, very much affect how well your run is going, especially on Lunatic. It's not necessary, but it's very helpful. And third of all, he's in a great class with great stats, with good potential options for the future. Bow Knight Niles is a really brain-dead way of taking care of ninjas because of Shuriken Breaker. Adventurer Niles is a really brain-dead way of solving the endgame because of pass and rescue access. Niles just provides so much, not even including his utility as a thief in a game where that actually kind of matters. So thief utility, capture utility, good stats, good skills, good class access, a game where bows matter and are relevant and are powerful. Niles kind of just has it all. And so it's one of those things where it's like, he's arguably very high tier, at least in Conquest. In Revelations, I who cares about Revelations balance? No one does. That's who. And so he's definitely up here. I don't know if he's the best unit, but he's definitely a very good unit. He just seems to have all those assets covered. The only thing he lacks is like bulk, especially early on. But you can play around that, and you can do things to kind of work him through. Now, as a note, like I said, I don't have Mozu on here, and I don't have Nina on here. One, because I've like never used Nina, and I don't feel comfortable talking about a unit I've never used. Two, because Nina, being a child unit, can fluctuate very wildly. Thank you, Lucina. Two, because child units can be shifted so much based on what skills you give them, what partner you have, all that different stuff. And so it's like, I'm not even gonna worry about discussing that. It's just not worth it. And two, to be whatever way I'm counting, that was for Nina. And for Mozu, she's a villager, not an archer, and yes, she's arguably most useful as archer, but I just don't really want to think about that, and so I'm just not going to. My tier list. Python and Leon are good payoff in SOV, just like they are in Gaiden. Arguably better early game, just because of the extra options they have with the weapons and combat arts that you get on bows, giving them extra accuracy and extra range and whatever. I think it's like curved shot or something on an iron bow, and there's something else on a steel bow that you can get to increase their accuracy or damage, I want to say. Either way, just those extra couple options help smooth out the early game, and then once you get to killer bow, obviously it's like easily best units in the game. I think because of their rougher early game, I'm still going to put them in good payoff instead of solid all game, but I am going to put them above their Gaiden counterparts because the killer bow is an even better payoff than just what monstrosity Bow Knights are at base. And then Etier and Alchrist, do I even get into this? I think the answer is it depends. You can say they have occasional usefulness. You can say they have planned obsolescence. Okay, let's actually be honest about this. Let's break it down. I'm not gonna run from this discussion. Let's have this discussion one at a time. Etier. No, Alchrist first. Alchrist first. Alchrist, for you, for your playthrough, because this is Fire Emblem Engage, and you can choose to invest in whoever you want, will either be mid, or solid all game. Or good payoff. Maybe not good payoff. Yeah, he'll either be mid, or he'll be solid all game. He comes basically at promotion level. You can promote him right away if you have a willingness to give him a Master Seal, because Master Seals are the reason why the Brodia squad... The restricted nature of how many Master Seals you have are why the Brodia squad gets a bad rep, because not only are the Brodia squad all fighting with each other for your Master Seals, they are fighting with all of the Firene squad and your starting squad for those Master Seals, as well as if you're using Anna, if you're using Jean, as well as... Yeah, so basically, all of the Brodia squad is fighting within themselves and against all the Firene squad and against all the optional joiners for like 3 Master Seals. That's not a lot of Master Seals to go around. If you decide to invest those Master Seals, you are likely going to invest other utilities such as good emblems, weapon forges, and mostly those two, good emblems and weapon forges, and maybe some stat boosters to make them good. In which case, Alchrist can become a very solid unit if you give him the investment. If you do not give him the investment fairly early on, he doesn't need it right away, but he does need it within the first couple chapters you get him, then he's mid. Etier, at worst, is planned obsolescence. If you do absolutely nothing with her, if you never give her a weapon forge, if you never give her an emblem, if you never give her a Master Seal, she will have planned obsolescence purely for her performance in Chapter 3, Chapter 4. Because she one-shots the flyers there. And there's 1 or 2 things you can do with her being a covert unit in like Chapter 5, with all the bushes there, to really boost her evasion and help pan out that map, to help buy you some extra time and whatnot. So, purely based on how I have ordered these tiers, one might argue that Etier is potentially better than Alchrist because at her worst, she is planned obsolescence, whereas at his worst, Alchrist is pretty mid. That said, at their best, they're basically, I don't necessarily want to say the same, but they're very similar. Alchrist arguably has a higher peak because his unique class gets the unique proc skill Luna, which is better than the archer's unique skill, which I think boosts their crit by 10% if they stand still. Sniper. Not archer, sniper. That said, if you reclass them into anything else, they're very similar and just kind of rely on their base stats and base growths, personal growths, which I think, depending on who you ask, Etier may be better than Alchrist, because Etier has more strength while Alchrist has more speed. But it also depends, because Engage technically has more ways to fix strength than it does to fix speed. though its ways of fixing speed are much more powerful than their ways of fixing strength. So you kind of need a combination of factors to fix strength, whereas for speed you just pretty much need Lyn. But Lyn can't be everywhere at once, and so it's a matter of investment. And this is the problem with discussing Engage. This is the problem with discussing Engage, because you can't just say a unit is good or bad. You must give every qualifier for that unit. And this is why I fell off discussing Engage. Which is interesting, because I find exploring those qualifiers potentially very interesting. If there wasn't a rabid fan base who would, like, throw you off a cliff if you don't say the things they want to hear. I don't know. Either way, I think it's potentially interesting, but I think it doesn't necessarily matter. In the grand scheme of things, nothing matters. None of this matters. I know, it's just a video game. But I think the discussion around Engage matters less because of how many tools it gives you. This is also why I refuse to put any of the Three Houses units onto this tier list, because I would love to discuss the pros and cons and merits of the various combat arts available for the bow-focused units in Three Houses. But I have not played with every single unit as an archer. I do not have that kind of time or patience or dedication. And even if I did, the real answer would be either why are you using this unit as an archer, or their planned obsolescence because a different unit is a better archer. And I can't just talk about the entire Three Houses cast. And if I talked about units like Shamir, well, that's a sniper, not an archer, so I've already kind of ruined the thing. But even then, the promotion system means... does that really even count? Does it really even matter? Hence why I'm not discussing Three Houses units. Even though I think there's a very interesting discussion on how Deadeye was created and implemented. But maybe I'll save that for another video. I've been rambling on a lot here. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope that this was decent filler. New Unit Design 101 should be on the way, assuming nothing horrible happens. I hope the microphone quality was good. Let me know what you thought of the audio in the comments down below. If you want to see me do tier list breakdowns and open freeform discussions for the units that I talk about in Unit Design 101 in the future, like with Myrmidons, the video I just put out, let me know. Again, this is a little more experimental. I just kind of need a little bit of filler content between my big uploads, like, because Unit Design 101, while they're fairly short videos and don't take a ton of editing, they are still a lot more editing heavy, and my brain needs a little bit of time in order for things to process and click correctly. So I can't just keep pumping those out every day. I wish I could. Seeing the numbers, I wish I could. But you're going to have to wait on that. Trust me, it's going to be worth it, though. But yeah, thank you for shout-out for current channel members C2 Pikalee and EnigmaticMrL. Thank you again for joining LaguzGuard. Those are the ones who are joining the chapter. Joining the chapter? I need to stop talking. Those are the ones who have joined the channel at the point of when I am recording this. If anyone else joins between me recording this and me putting it out, I will have your names in the description. And yeah, until next time, this is Mr. Zenith signing out.